I'd like to call the Charter Township of Chesterfield Regular Township Board Meeting for Tuesday, July 26, 2022 to order. Could we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Clerk Barry, would you call the roll?
Supervisor Kersten.
Here.
Treasurer Elliott.
Here.
Trustee Anderson.
Here.
Trustee Joseph. Here. Trustee DeMink.
Here.
Trustee Vosberg. Here. Clerk Barry is here.
Item 4, approval of agenda.
Item 4A is the approval of agenda with addendum if necessary.
Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion by Trustee DeMink, supported by Clerk Barry. Clerk Barry, would you call the roll?
Trustee DeMink.
Aye.
Clerk Barry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph. Aye. Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye. Item 5, presentations. Clerk Barry.
Item 5 is presentation of administration of the oath to 5 new part-time firefighters.
If I could call all the part-time firemen up front so we can identify you. Stand over by Chief Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Honorable board members, good evening. Wonderful opportunity this evening to introduce you to 5 new members of our team at Chesterfield Fire. I'd like to introduce, if you'd step forward, please, and I call your name, Connor Brzezinski, Sean Healy, Nicholas Prantera, Payton Nagle, and Robert Randall. They'll be coming on board with us as part-time firefighters, working regular part-time scheduled positions in the department. Also, they have so far gone through a pretty rigorous screening program, which includes their fire academy training they've had, and also the onboarding of us through our training, background check, and everything else like that. They've done a week-long orientation to learn the beginning of their skills, and from this point, they're going to do a year's worth of probationary work with us. So they'll be learning and sharpening their skills right alongside our other part-time and full-time members of the department. That being said, Mr. Supervisor, if possible, could we impose upon Township Clerk to swear them into their position?
Please raise your right hands and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear.
I do solemnly swear
That I will support the Constitution of the United States.
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
And the Constitution of this state.
and the Constitution of this state,
And that I will faithfully perform the duties
and I will faithfully perform the duties
of the office of firefighter
of the office of firefighter
in and for the Township of Chesterfield,
in and for the Township of Chesterfield,
County of Macomb,
County of Macomb,
State of Michigan,
State of Michigan,
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability,
So help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations.
Mr. Supervisor, we thank you and the board very much, and with your approval, we'll go ahead and dismiss them at this time, along with their families, and we're going to head over to Station 3.
Congratulations, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome aboard, yep. And
Thank you.
Item 6, department reports. Any department reports on the board? Clerk Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Just like to briefly inform the board that we did have our election integrity open house this last week. It was a very successful event. County Clerk Anthony Forlini was in attendance. We covered issues such as election fraud. We demonstrated and provided information on the security protocols regarding our equipment that is used, as well as going through the absentee balloting process and what happens to an absentee ballot before, after, and during an election, as well as a recap over what happened in 2020 here in Chesterfield Township, as well as some other, answering some questions with regards to what happened in the state of Michigan and around the country. Hopefully this will have provided residents full opportunity and transparency with regards to our processes and opportunity to ask questions. It was very well received. I'd like to thank the board for their support of that event, and like to thank the Clerk's Department staff, Deputy Clerk Niza, Election Coordinator George Mavis, Carrie Norberg, Daniel Rutledge, as well as Darlene, who as well, a new addition to the clerk's office, and all of our part-time staff members for elections this year. All of them were just absolutely huge in terms of contributing to the success of that event. Also like to thank our audio-visual team, Matt Habit, who came in and was able to record all of those sessions for us. So even though we had some concurrently occurring sessions, if someone missed it, they can go to our website, social media, or our YouTube channel, and they will be able to view those. Now, some of those are going to be edited for formatting and some audio issues, but not for content. So there will be some edited versions of those coming up that I believe will be a little more, a little easier to follow, as well as clean up some of the audio issues that occurred on that evening. As many of you may remember, we had a very large storm system that rolled through, and that caused a couple of issues for us. So, but all that being said, it was a very successful event, and Clerk Forlini's feedback from his office is that he thinks every clerk everywhere in the county should be doing this, and our presentations have in fact been forwarded to all of the Macomb County clerks. They were very impressed with what we did here, and all of that information has been forwarded to other clerks to hopefully use that as a template for presentations in their own communities. So we're very proud of that. Our team did an amazing job, and I just wanted to recognize them for that. In the clerk's office, board, we will be suspending passports because of the election that is coming up next Tuesday. Passport processing will be suspended from this Thursday until the following Wednesday. We will reopen passports on Thursday, August the 4th. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Clerk Berry. Trustee Joseph.
Yeah, just a quick update. Last week, July 20th, was our normal library board meeting, and I wasn't able to attend because we had our a committee that met for the first time regarding the sale of the Lagoon property. But I did want to advise the board and talk about the wonderful donation that was made to the library and was presented to the library on the 20th. Buddy's Pizza opened, and their initial day's sales were earmarked for the library. And on the July 20th library Board of Trustees meeting, they presented the board with a check for $7,408, which was, you know, a lot of pizza. I trust they had a great opening day, and they made a point to send that to the library. So it was a fairly sizable donation, and I wanted to recognize their entry into the community was done with a pretty sizable donation to the library. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further reports from the board? Any reports from the department heads? Seeing none, item 7, consent agenda. Clerk Berry.
All items on the consent agenda are considered routine by the board and will be enacted in one motion. There is no separate discussion of these items. If discussion of any item is required by a board member, it will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Public comments on the consent agenda items are permitted. 7A, approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting of July 12th, 2022. Approval request by the Public Works Department to pay invoice number 530366255 from UIS in the amount of $7,924. Item C, approve the payment of bills as submitted by the Finance Department.
Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as read?
Mr. Supervisor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Motion by Clerk Berry, support.
Second.
Treasurer Elliott. Trustee Vosberg, I'm sorry. Comments from the public?
Paul LaFata, 48055 Mallard. I noticed on Bill Run, there was a water bill for Brandenburg Park for $6,000 some odd dollars. I have a bad habit of looking at utilities because that's where you can save money. Not only is it way more than I've ever seen before, but is that one of the reasons why we had to sign a new contract to increase our usage? Something bumped in the night, and if nobody addresses it, it's going to happen again. Thank you.
Further comments from the public?
John Speaka, 53978 Conner Drive. As a taxpayer, resident in Chesterfield, and a candidate running for supervisor, the bill run still frustrates me to no end. One of the big issues that we need to get a grasp and control of is our fuel costs. Under facilities and operations, our fuel costs are astronomical. I mean, we're at $52.95.16, and it just seems to be climbing. I think what we need to do is, before we go out and hit the roads for the day, I think we have to come up with some sort of concept to hit as many places or wherever facilities and operations goes in this township, and just utilize it and just do it all within that certain section, or maybe we need to go to certain sections every day throughout the week to cut the fuel costs back. They're just astronomical. Another charge on there that maybe the board could explain to me was Blaze Contracting for the bridge pavement of $7,000. I don't remember board approval for this. Under water and sewer, our fuel costs, again, there are $69.93.28, astronomical. And then under the information and technology, for Civics Plus, the annual renewal for file support was $72.45.34. This is a new department that the board appointed supervisor and his assistant, the deputy supervisor, Mr. Duchesne, created a new department in the township. So if you could explain that, the residents' money, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public? Seeing no comments from the public, we'll bring it back up to the board. I have a motion by Clerk Berry, supported by Trustee Vosberg, to approve the consent agenda as read. Clerk Berry.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph. Aye. Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye. Item 8A.
Item 8A is to set a public hearing for the August 23rd, 2022 regular Township Board meeting at 7 p.m. to hear comments concerning the estimate of cost to provide police and fire protection as determined by the Township Board, and also on the distribution of the special assessment levy for said police and fire protection.
Do I have a motion to approve item 8A?
So moved.
Support.
Motion by trustee Anderson, supported by treasurer Elliott. Comments from the board? No comments from the board? Comments from the public? No comments from the public? I have a motion by trustee Anderson, supported by treasurer Elliott, to approve item 8A as read. Clerk Berry.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Item 8B.
Item 8B is to approve a recommendation from the Planning Commission to approve the rezoning request 354 for property located on the west side of Jefferson Avenue, north of Cotton Road, from C1 Local Commercial to MX1 Jefferson Mixed Use, parcel ID 15-0928326043, 15-0928326044, parcel ID 15-0928326050, 15-0928326051, 15-0928326052, and parcel ID 15-0928326053.
So moved.
A motion by trustee Demink,
Second?
supported by clerk Berry. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Yes, this petition was in front of the Planning Commission for a public hearing back in June. If the board recalls, a few meetings back, the board adopted a new ordinance for the MX1 district along Jefferson. This application was pending at the time. They held off and then subsequently amended their request to the new MX1 district. At this time, there has been no formal application for development, but there was talk of doing residential. And obviously with the ordinance just being approved because of the the concept called out in the master plan, the Planning Commission is recommending approval.
Thank you, sir. Trustee Demink.
It was in front of Planning Commission, and if I recall right, it was a 7-0 vote for it. All the planning commissioners voted for it. There were people from the public there. There was discussion regarding certain issues, especially from like prior, when there was going to be an addition to the car wash. You remember that, Dave? So this is sort of a mixed-use thing. The Planning Commission took it all into effect with this whole different concept. Giffords Webster was there, Jonathan was there, and the Planning Commission approved it unanimously.
Any further comments from the board? Trustee Joseph.
Yeah, this was a kind of a difficult piece of property in terms of the ability to develop it, because what it was zoned for didn't really fit with the community came out pretty strongly in opposition to previous, projects, and this seemed like a good opportunity to put something in that was a little less impacting from an environmental footprint, and something that the property owner and the surrounding neighborhood, it sounds like from your meetings and the public hearing, was fairly favorable, which hasn't happened since I've been on the board. Any negotiations about that property have always been fairly adversarial. So if you have a combination of things that meet the neighborhood's needs and the property owner's needs, that seems like a pretty good win for all involved. And it sounds like the public participation was fairly positive.
There was some against it. Jonathan, correct me, wasn't it, at the prior, wasn't allowed to be up a 20,000 square foot building, and now it only can be 6,000?
Yeah, that's
Okay,
correct.
I couldn't remember, that's why I wanted to ask him on it.
Yeah, there was some residents that initially came in opposition. I think they were a little more comfortable with it by the time the meeting was over. And that was the goal of that MX1 district, is along that stretch of Jefferson, it's very hard to develop because of your setbacks and the right-of-way width. and the shallowness of the lot. So with that district, we created reduced setbacks to bring the buildings closer to the road. As Trustee Dominican mentioned, you know, previously you could do up to 20,000 square feet retail. That's down to 6,000 now. So it's kind of a happy medium to try to make, you know, a little more comfortable for everybody.
Thank you.
Trustee Anderson.
Yeah, real quick, protocol question here. If there's any future development that goes up there, it would still have to be, the individual would still have to go through planning, right? Whatever's proposed up there to be developed?
That's correct. If they were just doing single-family lots and they met the requirements for that, it would just be a building permit. But anything beyond that, it would require planning approval.
Any further comments from the board? Comments from the public?
Paul Lafata. I remember when the owner of the car wash tried to get his piece of property rezoned that's to the south of the car wash, and it got turned down by the township board, mainly because there was residents that didn't want to have any type of facility where there were any type of chemicals used, including car wash waxes and everything else. Is there something in this ordinance that, you know, if somebody does build something, they have to go and get approval and make sure that because of the denial for the owner of the car wash has to get approval? Because it really doesn't seem fair for one person to get denied you know, a zoning change and somebody next door on the opposite side does. So will he be afforded to get the same zoning change as they're asking for right now? Thank you.
Jonathan, do you want to address that?
Yeah, a couple things on that. So the previous application was a PUD application. The current car wash, currently and previously, was an existing non-conforming use. Car washes are not permitted in the C3 district, and that's, or I'm sorry, in the C1 district. They're required to go in C3, and that property is zone C1. So they came in under the PUD application, which, again, we don't need to rehash history on that, but it was ultimately denied. And currently with the MX1 district, the car wash is not permitted in that district. Those are car washes, gas stations, stuff like that are more auto intensive, so they typically require a special land use in the C3 district. So with regard to that specific use, that would not be the case for this area.
Thank you, sir. Any further comments from the public?
Joe Kadich, I just wonder, within this study, I know that Dan Accavetti had that whole thing set up to what he wanted to see in that end of the township, but did anybody, when that was set up, consider the amount of traffic that goes down Jefferson and how any small shops like that would affect it? My street empties into Jefferson. There are times that I can hardly turn out of that street, and I'm sure Forbes and the other one all the way down there are going to be affected. Now, in that study, it says you're looking to bring in more people or more younger people into the area. Well, building shops isn't going to bring people into that area, but it will bring people in if they're going to be shopping. And somebody ought to take a look at that. That street can hardly handle the amount of traffic that goes down now. The other thing that concerns me, if it's going to be small shops, is there anything preventing cannabis offices going in there if the cannabis issue goes on the ballot and succeeds? Did we ever do anything about segregating and basically placing or demanding where cannabis shops can go? Or would that be open to any of these small shops that go in there?
Thank you, sir. Any further comments from the public? As you stated, anything that is proposed there would have to go back in front of Planning Commission, correct?
Correct.
All right. Thank you. Any further comments from the public? Seeing no further comments from the public, I have a motion by trustee Demink, supported by Clerk Berry, to approve item 8B. Clerk Berry?
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye. Item 8C.
Item 8C is to adopt Ordinance 198 to amend the Chesterfield Township Code of Ordinances, Chapter 76, zoning, to add Section 3.1.24, standards for a new county line crossings mixed-use district, MX2, to add Section 4.56, accessory dwellings, to add Section 3.24, MX2 district additional standards, amend Section 2.2, definitions to add new definitions, and amend Chapter 76, Article 5, subsection 5.34, screening requirements, Table 5.34.C.2, to add new line for MX2 screening.
Do I have a motion to approve item 8C?
Motion to approve.
Motion by trustee Vosberg,
Second.
supported by Clerk Berry. Jonathan?
Thank you again. Yes, this item here is very similar to the MX1 district that was in front of the board a few meetings back. This concept was developed as in part of the master plan process. If you can recall, it was discussed in the joint meeting between the Board of Trustees and the Planning Commission. It was also kind of worked and developed throughout our planning process with the master plan through surveys and public workshops. And then there was a presentation given on it during the follow-up meeting with the Township Board when the master plan was in its final draft form. Then the public hearing was held and adopted, and since that time, the MX1 on Jefferson was the first ordinance that was worked on. And then towards the end of that, simultaneously, this ordinance began being worked on. The public hearing was held with the Planning Commission, and they are recommending approval. So this is very similar to the Jefferson mixed use, except on a little bit larger of a scale. It runs the area of 26 Mile Road from I-94 to County Line. It's a mixture of uses: residential, single-family, multifamily, retail, restaurant, office uses. The main idea behind this concept is it's really a perfect location for it. It's kind of a blank slate that, you know, with Ascension being built, that would kind of be the central medical campus there. And with I-94 and the amount of traffic that is generated from that, peak time hours in the PM head east, so it's a right turn in, right turn out. So it's prime for retail and restaurant users in that location. So, you know, the Planning Commission and our planning consultants, planning department, all put a lot of work into this concept, and I'm excited to get it in front of the board and start moving forward with it.
Thank you, sir. Comments from the board? Trustee Anderson?
I'm just wondering, will these developments benefit from the proposed bond issue as far as the sewer running out County Line to 26 Mile Road? Will they enhance these developments or exacerbate them or accelerate them?
Yeah, it's certainly you know, a benefit. They certainly would rather connect to public sewer as opposed to having to use their own on-site treatment or a septic system. So I think that when and if the sewer is delivered up there, you're going to see a boom in that area of the township.
Trustee Joseph?
Yeah, just to piggyback on trustee Anderson's question, I think, of course it will. Why else? Why else? There's a whole bunch of people that are counting on this. This increases the profit margins when they are able to, you know, go into shovel-ready places. So of course it's gonna. We haven't met them, but they're out there. Aside from that, the project itself, when we discussed it during the master plan, was very consistent with some of the development that you see over in Shelby behind Costco, where you have a number of small residential facilities that are kind of on top of a small business. So you see a lot of, service-related, office space, accounting, bookkeeping, and then the owner of the business lives above the property, and it's very walkable, and there really is nothing in the way of a permitted use in our current zoning that allows for that type of arrangement. And I did like the idea of it not trying to be jammed into something that already exists. So the north end, having not been developed, is, as you say, a blank slate. So conceptually, I really liked everything about this, and I know Trustee Demink, when you came on to planning and the master plan was finally approved, this was a big deal, and Mr. Arroyo kind of brought this idea from other municipalities and worked with Mr. Palin. There was a really nice presentation on this, and I think when you see the conceptual, space, it works perfectly, especially in that area. And the other thing that a lot of residents complain about in terms of whenever there's development, you increase the traffic and the pressure on, existing infrastructure. This mixed use kind of combats that to some extent, in that you have the residential and the business community in one area. It's just a very nice balance, aside from doing all the infrastructure work beforehand at the expense of the rest of the township. I'm really in favor of this. I like this idea and the concept. So a lot of work was done, and nice work, Mr. Palin.
Other comments from the board? Clerk Berry.
Thank you. I was excited when we first looked at this as well. Do you foresee this type of development or this type of use being anywhere else in the township? I know that it's targeted in that area, and I agree with Trustee Joseph. I think it's perfect for it. It's going to bring a lot of character. It's going to give that village feel. It'll allow us to kind of maintain some of our country-like settings, but yet still allow for a lot of this commercial development and residential development. I think it's going to be a tremendous asset to us. Do you see any other places in the township where we might see this type of use other than the ones that's identified? And I also know, too, and just so the public's aware, this is another item that the Planning Commission approved unanimously, correct?
That's correct, yes. And to answer your question, not on this scale, we won't. We did identify other areas. Again, with that Jefferson ordinance, that's kind of the whole corridor. In the master plan, it was kind of narrowed down to certain spots along Jefferson, more little hamlet nodes as opposed to a larger kind of village concept at County Line Crossing. So we had a few spots along Jefferson, and also at 22 and Gratiot. A lot of those ones were identified due to existing conditions. Buildings closer to the road don't meet current setbacks, so it's kind of hard to redevelop with our current standards. So that was kind of a way to do a hybrid model. Whereas this one, as we said, is a larger scale, and as Trustee Joseph had pointed out, kind of keep everything internal there and have its own space. So yes, on a smaller scale, but not at this time to the degree we're looking at here.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I'm very happy to see this as well. I just wanted to correct one statement that I thought I understood being said, that the water and sewer development, if that does occur under the bonding, would be at the expense of the current township taxpayers. But it's my understanding that if that sewer goes in and we bond for that, then the new purchasers who would be tapping into that, they are the ones who will be paying for those costs, correct? And the cost of water and sewer and whatever else
That's
would
correct.
occur? All right, thank you.
Trustee Anderson.
Yeah, the question that Trustee Vosberg just brought up, if a developer ties into that sewer, are they going to pay a prorated cost of that sewer or tap fees for the water and sewer?
Both.
They're going to pay into, when they get here, they will pay, they'll be assessed.
Yes. Are we talking about the water and sewer project, or are we talking about the ordinance, the agenda item?
Well, I'd like the answer to that too, because that was the question that trustee Vosberg raised, which I thought was part of the project, so are we
Tap
not?
fees are scheduled to pay for the water and sewer project, correct, as growth develops, and they tie into it, it sustains itself.
Define sustains.
Pays for itself.
Okay, so they're gonna pay whatever the going cost is for that sewer to their endeavor, whatever that is, correct, what you're saying? Yes. Okay, that'll offset the other costs of the bond that's gonna be getting paid down for the 20 years, right? That's the plan. Oh,
That is news. That is big news, because we don't have anything in the structuring of that payment. So, I'm sorry? So does the MX2 incorporate a fee schedule? So as people come on board, they are now responsible for the construction of that line under the discussion we're having now. So how will the ordinance reflect the builder's obligation to the construction costs of the water line? Will that be part of the MX2? Because I didn't see that in the packet, and I don't know how I don't know the mechanism for how the rate would be assessed for the construction of the water, what I thought was a bond, and then depending on what time they come online, so if they come in 2 years, will the fee structure reflect the life of the line? Would it be reduced, and what's the formula? Where is that being copied from? Because I'd never heard of anything like that.
So you're confusing two things. Number one, the bond payment schedule hasn't even been constructed yet. So that formula hasn't been for the board, and when that's done, it will. What I'm saying is the user fees who develop their property will have to pay a tap fee, will fund that construction that goes up there for the sewer. That formula hasn't been created. We'll create that in the bond schedule should this board choose to sell the bonds. That will all be worked out with that sewer project. This request here is simply an amendment. We will address the financing of that one at a future date.
I'm satisfied with that, because you said both. You said the answer to his question was both. I was content to just vote on this, move along, but there's a very confusing tone when you say both, because they pay the tap-in fee, and then the argument that the tap-in fees will cover the cost. There's still a time, like we're proposing the MX2, then there will be construction, and then there's a whole lot of things that are years and years down the road. And the question that trustee Vosberg answered, the comment that I made regarding who's paying that comes out of the enterprise fund until the development arrives to offset these costs or these tap fees or user fees. But until that time, the infrastructure providing the MX2 district will be paid for, at least that portion, out of the enterprise fund. That's the only mechanism there is. Correct, Mr. Supervisor? Is that
correct.
Yeah, okay.
Any further questions? Any comments from the public?
Regarding the fees that the people will pay that are building along 26 Mile Road, get taken as an example what happened along 21 Mile Road. Basically, all of that sewer line was assessed to the people that owned the property, every one of them. In fact, the property that the library bought has about a $100,000 bill owing on it that the township was ready to forgive because it was a library. Now, the same thing should happen here. All those people that own property along 26 Mile where that main is going, it's assessed to them. They should pay for it right off the bat when it goes in, whether there's anything built there or not. That's the way things normally happen. Other people aren't responsible for their sewer line. If you want to do things right, that's the way you do it. Thank you.
Further comments from the public?
Gordon, 50393 Bauer. Well, one of the things I'm kind of concerned about when discussing all the implications of future projections regarding this area is this taking into consideration the notions of what we're going to find out this week regarding the potential future recession at hand here, and whether or not that's going to cause any economic downturns that would defer any type of projections for future of this development, because as we've known from the 08 recession, that will cause damaging things to our local economy. And we're at that beginning point, and we're going to find out whether or not we are in defined recession this week, and whether or not the Fed's continuing interest rate hikes will defer any type of purchases for such bonds in the future. Thank you.
Further comments from the public?
Paul Lafata. There seems to be a lot of initiative to, satisfy developers. And, we're going to take out a bond to put a sewer line in for developers, not for the residents. We're going to amend ordinances for developers so that they can develop their property. We're going to pay for their sewer line. And the problem is if
Mr.
you look
Lafata,
at...
can I interrupt you? Can you speak to the ordinance, the agenda item that's in front of us tonight?
I'm speaking to the agenda item
I'm going to
because...
ask you to speak to the ordinance.
I'm speaking to
and
the
the
ordinance
issues of the
because what the
ordinance that are on
ordinance
the
is
agenda.
doing, what the ordinance
sir.
is doing is they're allowing people to utilize funds from the township residents to benefit them. That's what the ordinance is doing. In
Thank you,
other
Mr.
words, the
Lafata.
residents are going to pay for it.
Thank you, Mr. Lafata.
This is really, Brad, you should think about what you're doing and what the people on the board are doing. You're shutting the residents down because you don't want them to speak the truth. And
No.
you don't want to hear the truth.
Mr.
And
Lafata, I'd
it's
like you to
really
speak
so
to item
too bad.
8C.
You want to have me removed, have me removed.
I'm not removing
But
you.
I am
I'm
going
asking
to
you to
speak.
speak to the agenda item. You're confusing the issue.
I'm not confusing
Yes, you
the
are,
issue.
sir.
What you're doing is you're paving the way. It's one little domino after another. You're paving the way. And it's at the cost of the residents. And recouping the money is years away. You look at today's economics, you look at the interest rates, and you look at the affordability of new homes, and it's eons down the road, and the residents are going to suffer. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Further comments from the public? I have a motion by trustee Voss. I'll bring it back to the board. Any further? Trustee Joseph.
Yeah, just to clarify, Mr. Supervisor, and I apologize for, I probably should have just let Trustee Vosberg's comment go about the, forwarding. I felt confident she knew the answer to that, and I was, I bid on the hook. This really is not an agenda item about the bond issue. The bond issue was debated and decided. You can have an opinion and disagreement about the bond issue. This agenda item is really about a master plan, and in terms of this, what we're voting on. I don't want anybody to think I'm voting on an agenda item that incorporates other elements that were already decided by this board. This agenda item is not about the infrastructure that is there. It allows for businesses to construct these, I think the term that was used during the master plan was sort of a hamlet-type environment where you have businesses that are allowed to come in with the property owner, the business owner living at the business. And when we talked about it when I was on the Planning Commission, Mr. Arroyo suggested I take a look at, and I was fairly familiar, and then I went over and looked at what they have in Shelby Township. And that was a an area that was built like, or developed and planned like this area is being proposed, this MX2 is being proposed. And to me, it was a good blend of both in that it didn't have the heaviest possible footprint imaginable when developments come in. This was the nicest combination of maintaining that existing kind of landscape with some development. So the side conversation is not part of this. It really is not, and I hope it doesn't influence anybody's, vote on an ordinance change for the concept of what this, property will look like. Again, notwithstanding all the other arguments about the infrastructure and so forth, it's just not part of the vote here on this agenda item.
Thank you, Trustee Joseph. Further comments? None. I have a motion by Trustee Vosberg, supported by Clerk Berry, to approve item 8C. Clerk Berry.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
No.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye. Item 8D.
Item 8D is to approve a recommendation by Facilities and Operations Department to extend the current janitorial contracts for municipal office and Department of Public Works buildings through December 31st, 2022.
We have a motion to approve item 8D as stated.
Motion to approve as stated.
Clerk Berry, supported by Supervisor Kersten. Mr. Sonnenberg.
Good evening. This is just a simple request to extend our current vendor contract until December 31st. So basically another roughly 5-month period.
Comments from the board? Trustee Joseph.
Yeah, Mr. Sundberg, I recall that this isn't the first extension of this contract, and I know when we discussed the last extension, there were some issues that you wanted to resolve before entering into a more standard full contract, that we were going to explore those areas, and you were asking for an extension. And so could you give us an up-to-date in terms of why an extension of just for the remainder of the year, and why we're not, going into a full contract with a vendor?
So what I recall is this is the first extension for this contract. The previous contract, the 1-year contract that we had initially, we asked for extensions while we changed the scope, because there was a lot of back and forth when we went from this process from internal labor to a vendor. We went back and forth with some of the staff, some of the board, and we really honed in that scope to get it to where it is. And actually what it did, if anything, over that time, is it was a consistent increase in scope. So that's to where we are now, which basically got us through COVID, and we'd like to stay locked in at this rate, because I'll be honest with you, if we go out to bid right now, we're looking at an increase, the way things are going. So I would like to lock this contract in, going into the new year, maybe post-election, and then revisit it.
Any further comments from the board? No comments from the board? Comments from the public?
John Speaka, 53978 Connor Drive. In regards to giving the cleaning company an extension, I totally oppose that. I'm up here every month complaining about the $6,000 a month, close to that, $58.97 that we're paying just for this building here. On top of that, the township picks up all the costs for everything that the cleaning company uses. So whether, they restock the toilet paper, the soap, any cleaning supplies, we pay for that. So now if you take that $6,000, we're probably close to just over, I'd say probably about $7,200 just for this. Plus, we get billed about $2,600 for the DPW that they clean too. So when you combine the two, it's an astronomical cost. Even if we put 2 people in here and we brought in a part-time crew at $15 an hour, we would save the township a huge amount of money. I don't understand why we're not looking at this concept. I know that you don't understand business. I get that. So that's why you don't look at that avenue. And the easy way out is to try to bring a company in here and push the work onto someone else. But you know what? Start considering the taxpayers' money that you continuously keep wasting. And you are the pro at that, wasting it. Thank God we're down to a week. That's it.
Any more relevant conversation from the public?
Paul Lafata. There was an APO that was authored by our past supervisor. In that APO, it said that all contractual services after 3 years should be put out to bid. We don't seem to follow our process and procedures. Management's really easy. There's process and procedures to follow and a budget to stay within. And it seems like there's so many instances where we don't follow our process and procedures and we don't stay within our budgets. So therefore, I guess the part of management must be lacking. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public?
Mike Martin, 50393 Bauer. Regarding the this contract, I don't understand the importance of having a third-party contractor come in to provide something as simple as janitorial services. This is coming from someone who actually has worked a third-party contractor job doing janitorial services. But I've also done janitorial services in almost every job I've ever done, and I don't understand why, regardless of how many people work within a facility, a simple, almost like home chore situation cannot be accomplished. Can people not simply cycle through providing basic janitorial services on a, dare I say, daily or weekly basis? This person's duty is to vacuum the carpets in this room at the end of the day, that sort of thing. I'm not saying to force it upon all the employees, but it is something very simplistic and not really requiring a massive contract. If this is something that I have done as a firefighter, as a person in the military, anyone can do this type of work. And it's not without regard that you need to hire from outside the facility to come in, especially when you're dealing with the fact that you're hiring on people from an outside vendor to come into a building that could house documentation that you may not want outside people to have hold of, but you're either going into secretive rooms, or no, I shouldn't say secretive, but more or less non-accessible to the public rooms. That's not exactly an ideal situation. So it would be much easier to have everything done in-house within employees, and would create a more communitarian aspect within their working environments. This is their workplace. They should be the ones taking care of it. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public? Any further comments from the public? Bring it back up to the board. Comments from the board. Trustee Joseph.
Yeah, just I don't know. I don't know what morale looks like in this building, but when you put up the sign-up sheet for the employees to take a turn cleaning the women's room and the men's room, I wouldn't want to be here. I certainly wouldn't want Mr. Duchesne's job on that day, but you can't have employees outside of maybe the common areas that are used by the employees. There's a sign somebody put in our break room. It says your mom doesn't work here, wipe your own dishes, you know, that kind of, like, I get the communal, you know, assistance with cleaning the building, but this building is accessible to the public, so employees can't really be expected to, you know, maintain the grounds and things like that. I like the idea, but it's just a building this size that is open to the public, and in terms of confidential areas, and I thought the original contract it just assumed, and it's been a while since I looked at it, but these are licensed and bonded, you know, companies that get the bid. My question, in terms of the contract, the executive summary talks about a 90-day extension to review, allow time to prepare and request for proposal. The agenda item asked for the extension through to December 31st. So I've never been a fan of contract extensions, and I appreciate the clarification and timeline, but this comes to the board This contract expires through July 29th. What is the board supposed to do if they don't pass it? So there's not a lot of actionable time to really do anything different. I'm not a fan of contract extensions or no bid contracts, and I don't know why we didn't look at this, you know, in proximity to the ability to actually do something. So if you vote it down, then what are we voting? To have no janitorial services after July 29th? I guess clarity on the time of the extension, and then what happens if we vote it down? What happens to the facilities and operations? You know, who does it?
$15 an hour employee. I apologize. The reason this is dynamic too is because we're taking possession of the school and the community, the newly formed community center located at Sugarbush Elementary School. So again, we'll take some analysis through this moving forward to the end of the year. We'll see where it's at, and obviously come back and we'll be in a better position to address the long-term solution for this contract.
Just as a follow-up then, so the contract that you're looking at now would be incorporating additional duties.
Correct.
And so there's a need to take a look at the contract as a whole. Is that?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments from the board? I have a motion by Clerk Berry, supported by Supervisor Kersten, to approve item 8D. Clerk Berry.
Clerk Berry, aye. Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee DeMink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Item 8E.
Item 8E is a recommendation to approve to confirm the appointment and employment contract of Mitch O'Connor as Director of Public Services.
Supervisor Kersten will make a motion to approve.
Support.
Supported by Trustee DeMink. In the packet, in your council packet or board packet is the relevant documents to this position. It is consistent with past employment contracts that we've had. Director Duchesne, do you want to address anything substantively of this, where this ended?
Anything outside of the agenda report, I'll be happy to answer, but I think clearly it's part of starting back with the Plant Moran review from August 31st of 20. We were beginning to look at different things to modernize and certainly upgrade the services in a more contemporary manner of Public Works. This leadership change gives us the opportunity to do some realignments and enhancements to it. And as mentioned in the report, without reservation, Mitch O'Connor is qualified for the position and meeting the expectations of the last evaluation. Adding those in clearly is able to not only just manage things, but to enhance things. Our realignment of that department, including the new assistant director that will be starting tomorrow, will make it one of the better and stronger organizations of its type eventually in the area. So I don't have any other material comments. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Comments from the board? Trustee Joseph.
More questions and comments. The compensation package, is it the same compensation packet that was afforded the previous director? So Mr. Coddington stepped down, retired. This is his contract, would you say?
Substantially, yes. The changes made since we have discussed the consolidation of some position, it is slightly different. It is consistent with our non-union contracts in all the other areas, sir.
Well, those are difficult to compare because those are different crafts. What is the compensation, the annual salary of this position as it relates to Mr. Coddington's?
It is approximately going to be $12,000 more.
And did Mr. Coddington have a take-home vehicle?
Yes, he had the ability to and did have a vehicle assigned to him.
No, I don't know, when you say the ability, you could sign out because he would go to job sites and things. What is the proposed vehicle here? Is this a DPW vehicle? What is the?
He will not be taking a vehicle home.
It's in his contract.
He can, he is not at this present time taking the vehicle home.
No, the question is this contract outlines use of a township-owned vehicle. What is that? What is that? Is that in the course of his day?
Course of his employment, yes.
Okay, I'll move on.
We have a regulation about the use of vehicles the individuals sign for and what they can and can do with it. The supervisor may, I'm hesitant to say absolutes because the supervisor may give him permission to utilize the vehicle to and from at a time. The individual does not choose to do that, then that is part of the consideration, but he is not given a vehicle in the course of employment, such as the public safety director, to use all the time for other personal matters and things.
Okay, and then the, all of the other employee benefits in terms of PTO, those are consistent with Mr. Connington's contract?
With the management contract under ASME, yes, sir, we're comparable to that.
What happens to the engineering position that's currently occupied by Mr. O'Connor?
The engineering position and his position are really consolidated in the Director of Public Services. The positions, then we would have one individual who's the engineering services and the public service director. The new position incorporates both of those.
What's the plan for separating those in the enterprise fund?
Well, the cost allocation, now that we have more advanced ways of doing that, we will allocate time and based on the actual hours spent in the various areas. So water and sewer will only be charged for the amount of time that he oversees engineering inspectors, which report to him in water and sewer, and then any other work that's done in the public works area, which of course, again, I don't want to go into a lot of elaborate detail, but there is no such thing as a public works department. In financial circumstances, there's a series of funds that are utilized and charged to it. So the proportion of work and supervision is directly tied to the number of personnel, the activities, and the work of the individual.
So the BSNA software will hopefully provide the ability to account for Mr. O'Connor's work as it relates to the enterprise fund. Fair?
Fair, yes.
And will that be something that we could see maybe even in the bill run in terms of like how that's the problems that we run into as a board in terms of discussion about the enterprise fund or other funds that involve administrative fees or interdepartmental transfers, whatever. It gets difficult because you can't track what role the individual is playing on a particular job, and it is important in terms of whether it's enterprise fund eligible and so forth. Will this sort of new the forward thinking and the combination of the engineer and the previous, will this also come with it, the ability to track those, given that we have the software and the vision? Are we going to be able to see that easily in even something as the bill run?
Probably not the bill run because it's part of payroll, but we can do an extract and reports. Finance today, in fact, we have meetings that we're implementing BSNA right now.
Yeah.
And all the staff is training and doing that. There's a number of features. The report writer that I've seen and used before is capable of breaking down cost allocation for salaries and benefits by fund and running a report as such. And in fact, under the direction of the supervisor, we are in the process and we'll have some meetings about the changes or modifications to the inter-fund transfers. So that may be a thing of the past, as we will do accurate on hourly cost allocation to the cost center that the person actually works in or the equipment is charged to, those things that many modern municipalities have.
Clerk Bear.
Since this new position, as it's being restructured, eliminates the township engineer position, on a go-forward basis, with subsequent new hires for this position, will the PE be required? Will there be a professional engineer requirement, since we're getting a professional engineer with Mr. O'Connor? will that be part of it, since this is essentially eliminating the township engineer position?
Yes.
Thank you. That was easy.
Further questions from the board? Trustee Domingue.
I think Mr. O'Connor is well qualified, and he's the first between water superintendent, DPW superintendent, to where we're at now, who has an engineering degree since the inception of that position from the 50s. And I'm pretty sure, I think I know that pretty well, because I've known all the guys that have been in that position. So Mitch is well qualified, and I highly recommend him for that position.
Any further comments? No further comments from the board? Comments from the public?
Paul Lafata, 48055 Malin. First of all, when decided to use Plant Moran to audit the water and sewer department for somewhere around $7,000 to $8,000, I tried to figure out why. When the audit was complete, about a month after, I went and FOIA'd the information because it wasn't readily available and it wasn't posted. In the information, there was mention of recommendations for BS&A that I recommended that the township move to back in 2017 that was rejected. There was mention that there should be some Six Sigma training for the employees, which is a lot of statistics and how to do things right and everything else. I also FOIA'd all the work product, and I FOIA'd the executive review meeting that was part of the quote package from Plant Moran. Nowhere did I get any information that said that there was planning to combine positions or anything. So did I get shortchanged on a FOIA because the second request for the information for the work plan in the meeting, I never got because they said it never took place and there wasn't any. So now we're using this as a recommendation to hire somebody, and we're using Plant Moran, and the information that I FOIA'd that should have come and should have included this supposedly doesn't exist based on the FOIA that I got. Nothing on the second one. Not. Zero. Nada. And are we in violation of FOIAs, or are we just using Plant Moran as a buzzword for a recommendation? That's one of the things that really get me sometimes. We use certain people for recommendations, and it really wasn't a recommendation from the Plant Moran audit, because I should have had this information when I made a FOIA. Everything that is paid for with tax dollars is FOIAble, and I didn't get anything. And now we're saying that this was a Plant Moran recommendation. Second of all, anytime anybody uses a company vehicle to take it home other than a first responder, it's IRS taxable. And the employer can be fined, because I looked it up, for not reporting it as income. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public?
Joe Kadich, I'd like to suggest that from all of the conversation going on here, that before you make this nomination and promote Mitch, that you lay out to the public exactly what this water department's going to look like. Right now, it's kind of like the sewer going along 26 Mile Road. You put it in and it'll come. There doesn't seem to be a lot of organized use here. I don't understand that. How you can put up a department when you don't even have a department, or call for a department head when there isn't a department organized. Most of the people that were in that water building over there are gone. And getting back to Mitch, basically his hiring supposedly came from, or did come from, a recommendation by the Water Board. We recommended a PE engineer, basically, so that he could eliminate a lot of everything that was going out to the engineering company. We found out that there was about $500,000 worth of work going to AEW back then that nobody could even account why we were doing it. And when Mitch was hired, the promise was that he would make his own salary into the reduction of amount of work having to go out to the engineering company. That never happened, that I word of. Nobody ever checked it afterward. And I don't even know, is Mitch a registered professional engineer? I don't know. Does anybody know? Is that going to be one of the qualifications? You know, some of the things I think about that Mitch was involved in, that I had a problem personally, is the fact that really there was no follow-up on, even when he put out projects for bid, and they came back and they were adopted, basically nobody looked at them after that. There was no follow-up. A good example is the one on Miller Court where they put that lift station in, and it ended up, because nobody looked at it when they were here, nobody followed it when in, somebody on Miller Court ended up with a control board for that lift station in the front of their yard. You had half of Miller Court residents here complaining, for this one guy had the control panel for that
Mr. Cage,
in front of their yard.
you wanna
It cost,
speak to
and
the
they
agenda
paid
item?
the engineering company
speak
to
to the agenda
rewire it
item?
and figure out where it was supposed.
Mr. Kadich, do you want to speak to the agenda item?
That is the agenda item. You're
No, it's
talking
not,
about
sir.
hiring Mitch. All I'm
correct.
saying is,
Stay
you
on
want to do
topic.
an interview. You know, he's going to work for us, so I think we should be part of the interview.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Time's up. Further comments from the public?
John Speaka, 53978 Connor Drive. Here is a prime example of the fixer, or the deputy supervisor, not being able to give trustee Joseph a honest and direct answer. The question was simple. Is he going to be able to take a car home? That's a yes or no answer. It does not go in the scope of difficulty unless you want to avoid the question and not answer it truthfully, which you did. Couldn't even give an exact amount. When trustee Joseph asked, he compared him to Don Connington's salary, he said about $12,000 more. Can we get an exact number of what that number is? The issue that I have is Mitch can't even answer simple questions when asked at the township board meetings up here. Does he have an S1 license to qualify him for the position? I didn't hear that come up. I don't think he does. Was the job posted? I didn't see the job posted. And the main issue is when you have an engineer on staff that can't even design or sketch a simple concrete form to put out for the company that's going to pour the concrete, now we're going to put him in charge of water and sewer. In my opinion, he's not qualified to do the job. You had qualified people here to do the job. Unfortunately, you pushed them out. So, and now you want to bring in somebody that's not qualified to oversee our water department. This is drinking water that all the residents are going to drink. There's a lot involved here. I am highly concerned on not having a highly qualified, skilled individual in this department. This should be an automatic no. Again, to the board-appointed supervisor, do your job and hire the right person for the job. He is not the right person for the job. Thank you.
Further comments from the public?
Michelle Fitch, 49207 Bracton Court. I have several concerns. I read through the employment agreement, and it has no expiration date. Normally, employment agreements are 1, 3, 5 years, with options to renew. This one has none. Yet, if he's an at-will employee, and you let him go for whatever reason, you pay him 6 months' salary. So there should be an end date on his contract to begin with. I didn't realize that you'd only have to work less than 10 months a year to gain a $119,000 salary either. That was really crazy to me. If he doesn't have an S1 license and you lease one out for $1,000 a month from another person, and Don Coddington had all the licensing, why is he getting paid more than Don Coddington got paid? If your deputy director that you hired has 18 years experience in the DPW department and has all his licenses, I'm assuming, why wouldn't he be considered the DPW director and not Mitch? If he is an engineer, doesn't have the proper licensing, has never run a DPW department for 20 years like several of our other people that have been forced out, I don't understand why you're even considering him, and you didn't go out publicly and really look for one, in my opinion. Also, your new department, you now have 5 department heads in Department of Public Services. 5? How many did you have when it was just the DPW department? I don't understand where all this growing government comes from. You're a Republican board. You're supposed to be making government less, not more. So I hope you turn this down, regardless of what Mr. Demink's saying. He's so qualified. I find it hard to believe when he doesn't even have the proper licensing. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public? Any further comments from the public? Bring it back up to the board. Go ahead.
Thank you. The qualifications piece, I don't know that it's appropriate to weigh in on that from my vantage point. Typically, board members, we don't usually see the day-to-day employment. I thought this came to the board because of the uniqueness of the combination that we were sort of restructuring. So in terms of the, I have some issues that were, I think, already stated with regard to the S1. There was that was part of the department head had that certification. I assume that Mr. O'Connor is working towards that, and I know that we have, secured all of the necessary licenses to be in compliance with the state as it relates right now. So one of the comments regarding the safety of the drinking water and so forth, that is monitored very heavily by outside entities, primarily the state of Michigan. So they come in and make sure that we have on board the necessary, licensing. How we pay for it is a completely different issue, but in terms of the end product being safe drinking water, I feel very confident that that is something that continues to be monitored. Even if you have zero faith in the township staff that are chiefly responsible, you have the oversight of the state, which comes in and requires testing occur, properly there. I think we have an obligation. I would assume that somebody at 120K would be able to come in and do all of the testing that's required of the department, but in this case, Mr. O'Connor was hired, and Mr. Kadich got up and spoke about the origins of the engineering. There's not a lot of people in this room who were front and center for all of the water rate meetings and the committee that met monthly for several years. But what came out of that committee meetings was a white paper, and the speaker was spot on. The engineer was brought in to reduce the costs associated with the vendor engineering services. That was And that was a difficult lift, but it still happened. We still made a dent in the outside vendor because Mr. O'Connor was brought in as an engineer, very qualified in that area. What's happened over the years is I think he's been pulled from those assignments, and now he's been pulling double duty since Mr. Coddington left for some time. There's a whole host of problems that I have, with this, and I don't really want to belabor them. I'm just going to be a no vote, Mr. Supervisor, but I do take issue when for verbal presentation is that coming out of the consulting. It doesn't say that in our executive summary. It does not say that in our executive summary. In fact, the executive summary says something to the effect of, well, I want to make sure I get it right, that with input from Plant Moran Consulting. So that's on pen and paper. That's what the text says. In the deliberations, we say coming out of the recommendations, which is not true, and we get into trouble when we do that because this was not part of a recommendation in that report. Now, if I pay somebody to consult with me and I say, do you think it's a good idea, and they nod along, then I can use them, and that's different. That's different. I don't know that we commissioned a study on the organizational makeup of the department. The compensation seems askew to me. We have increased duties, and we do have so many department heads now. That we're just creating. We have departments, and it's been a while since I've talked to him, but you go back and look at what Mr. Ellis did here as the township supervisor, and I know we've changed and we do need, but he was everything. He was everything, and I like the idea of modernizing and not having the township supervisor be responsible for, everything, especially when some of these department heads can, mismanage can cost you a lot of money. So it was right, but, 2 aspirins are good for a headache, the whole bottle, not so good. And I feel like we have now created an entire departments out of thin air with support staff, and I don't know how we are going to adequately separate what Mitch will do in the water department from the enterprise fund. And I really dislike those murky areas because for 4 years we had people assigned. Our facilities and operation was assigned to do all kinds of special projects, had really nothing to do with the scope of what we hired them for, and now we're creating a department where we're combining an existing employee who's a good engineer, and now he's head of the water department and an engineer, and it just gets very, very, again, I could go for days. I'm just going to be a no vote on this and pipe down.
Any further comments from the board? I have a motion by Supervisor Kersten, supported by Trustee Demink, to approve item 8E. Clerk Berry.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
No.
Trustee Joseph. No. Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Clerk Berry. Aye.
Item 9, public hearings. There are no public hearings scheduled. Item 10, addendums. There are no addendums. Item 11, public comments, 5 minutes. The clock will begin when you speak. Floor is open.
Michelle Fitch, 49207 Bracton Court. Effective today, we lost our 16th employee that was here for 20-plus years. I really wish Mr. Kersten and Mr. Duchesne would think about how the employees are being treated. You don't give up 20, 25 years for no apparent reason. You do it because of the way you're treated. You're disrespected. You're forced out. I've seen enough of it. People are fired. People are pushed out. And you sit there, and Mr. Duchesne, and you think it's funny. and it's really not. It's really sad. We've lost another person with a ton of experience, and now you're gonna need somebody for Parks and Rec. Someone who gave her heart to this township for years. You can shake your head all you want, Mr. Kersten, it doesn't matter. And my other question is, why is everything written by Mr. Duchesne? Are you in charge of everyday operations, or is Mr. Duchesne? That's what I'd really like to know. Thank you.
Any more comments from the public?
I guess rather than dwell on what happened here tonight, I got enough information, I could probably go on for more than the length of this meeting as to what happened here and the disinformation and everything that's happening to the public, but I'll go into past things. First of all, the Plant Moran audit last week. Basically, that was supposed to be Treasurer Elliott. I had asked her to go through the budget, show us where the township is financially sound. We ended up with a Plant Moran presentation of about 10 minutes for a $44 million budget. Didn't show me much, still didn't show me much. I think I found out more from Mr. LaFata when he went actually into the budget to find out where the problems were. Thank you for that. So basically, I said I'd vote for Brad Kersten if you demonstrated in the budget that you could show us where we're financially sound. That didn't happen, so Brad, I won't be voting for you. The other thing is I brought up, and you guys came back with a letter basically praising the police department for everything they did and buying what they did for the essentially cover up selling the used assault rifles, which I really had a problem with. There's 15 rifles out in the street that shouldn't have gone out in the street, and in the letter you said, well, you got $6,000 for them. Now, you're looking at the police budget, what, over $10 million, $11 million, and you're worrying about $6,000? That doesn't make sense. I wonder if you asked your police department whether they thought it was all right to let those things go out in the street. I bet your, basically your group that goes out to the funerals and everything, your honor guard, probably went to the Detroit funeral. I wonder if you told them, or you even knew, or they explained to the Detroit policemen that you guys let weapons go back onto the street. That's really bad. The decision to do it, that started in the, probably with Brad Kersten and the public safety director, ought to pay for that. You guys ought to resign. I said that in my letter. I believe it. And the other guys signed the letters where you praised everything else in there that included the selling of the rifles, which tells me that basically you don't have a problem with assault rifles being out there. I can understand the Second Amendment, but I sure as hell don't understand everybody having the right to have an assault rifle. Doesn't make sense. I don't want it. I don't believe it. Nobody can show me where it makes any sense or where it should be happening. The other thing I sent you today goes back on what Paul's been trying to get to happen, is that somebody put on the Facebook, Anzo, what's his name, Facebook page, that there's PFAS in certain areas, listing all the different zip codes. I responded, and they're saying, where are these zip codes? And the PFAS is still coming from Selfridge. That got eliminated almost in an hour. But it'll listed in there, Paul's been asking you to post that Selfridge sustainability study. They talk about the PFAS in it. They say that they're looking for basically an excuse or reasonable excuse that they don't have to be required to meet the state standards. So it's still happening. People in this township should know about that. They should also know about the noise that is talked about in Selfridge's own sustainability study. For some reason or other, this board doesn't want to let their own residents know what they're up against Because if those F-35s come here, whether they come here or not, that PFAS is still a problem out there. And nobody's forcing them to do it. It's sad. I just don't understand why this board wants to go their own way, ignore what Selfridge is doing, and cater to Selfridge. There's no reason for it. If you don't want to do your duty, then resign. I don't think anybody will miss you. Thank you.
Good evening, Township Board and Chesterfield Township residents. My name is John Spica, and I reside at 53978 Conner Drive, and I am running for supervisor. We have seen firsthand how disastrous this board-appointed supervisor, Brad, and his deputy supervisor, Steve Duchesne, have been to this township in the last 12 months. The board-appointed supervisor can't manage, lead, or balance a budget. He cares less about the residents' money. He could care less about the residents' money. It's not the board-appointed supervisor's money. The board-appointed supervisor doesn't even own a house in Chesterfield. The board-appointed supervisor, again, is a carpetbagger. He pays no property taxes on a house, and he's okay with raising all the Chesterfield Township residents' property taxes and water rates. The board-appointed supervisor is a wrecking ball to the township. He's been that since day one. We are 7 days away from one of the most important elections in Chesterfield's history. On August 2nd, a week from today, which is a primary to select a new supervisor to move forward to the November ballot. We all have the power to change the course in Chesterfield and elect someone who truly cares, can manage and lead the township, and most importantly, knows what the hell they're doing. The saying in the township right now is ABB. ABB. ABB is anybody but Brad. The residents have 4 highly skilled and qualified candidates to choose from. Myself, John Spica, Joe Kadich, Paul LaFata, and Michelle Fitch. Chesterfield Township deserves better than the board-appointed supervisor, Brad. Residents can thank the board-appointed supervisor for the $13 million bond issue, which he refuses to talk about. He doesn't even want it published in the paper till after the election that he pushed through for the sewer line on 26 Mile Road. That will not benefit the current residents of Chesterfield. The board-appointed supervisor wanted to spend $26,000 of taxpayers' money for a half a gallon of paint to an overpass for branding. Here's the best one yet. The current board-appointed supervisor has spent, according to his filing records, $21,982.85 on his campaign, where 2 of his opponents were in this room tonight, Mr. LaFata and Michelle Fitch. 2 opponents, almost $22,000 on 2 people that haven't even put a single sign out in the township. That, to me, this is how reckless the board-appointed supervisor is with even donors' money. The bottom line is the board-appointed supervisor in Chesterfield, I've watched him for the last year, he calls himself a Republican. He is not a Republican. He is a wolf in sheep's clothing. He is an autocrat, that's the correct term, who doesn't believe in democracy, which is majority rule, who doesn't believe in transparency. He is a clear and present danger to the residents of Chesterfield and all the employees of the township and needs to be tossed out immediately. On August 2nd, vote ABB. ABB is anybody but Brad. Mr. Kadich talked about the PFOBs. On the PFOBs, Mr. LaFata has asked the board-appointed supervisor numerous times to put the posting, the Selfridge posting on the website. He refuses it. If it doesn't benefit him in any way, he won't do it. He says he listens to the residents. He doesn't listen to the residents. Brad does what Brad wants to do. Instead of talking about the important issues and how we're operating with a budget deficit in this township, he sends flyers out, he talks about CRT, he talks about election integrity, he talks about everything else but what's important to the residents of this township. Again, we're 1 week out. The residents know what to do. It's ABB, and we can move this township forward. I want to thank Mr. Ferlini for coming to Chesterfield and answering the residents' questions. That's how it's supposed to be done. Thank you.
Further comments from the public?
That's how it's supposed to be done. Thank you.
Paul LaFata, 48055 Mallard. Plant Moran audit at the last board meeting was kind of at a level that most people probably didn't understand what they were saying. I don't know if it was on purpose or not, but if you take some time to read the Plant Moran audit and you go to the statistical data that's back on page, I think, 67, there's a lot. It's the township board's performance review for the last 4 years. If you look at 2016, when Supervisor Kersten took over, which his term isn't quite over yet, and you look at the increase in the cost of government and the growth in government, and then you look at some of the other statistical data where there's shrinking fund balances. And what really was surprising, and I didn't find out until I read the audit, was that there was an amendment to the amendment of the 2021 budget that reduced the spending in every department but one, cut out $1.2 million out of that 2021 budget, which was surprising. There should be supervisors running for election every year. If that's what it takes to cut $1.2 million out of a budget to have an election every year, maybe the residents should be in for it. But you look at some of the data, and government grew, but the only services that I can recollect that the residents actually got was the garbage cart enterprise. And a lot of residents probably benefited from it because the residents that didn't buy a garbage truck paid about $40 or $50 their tax dollars towards it. You look at some of the data, and the important data, and the township general fund is only 76% of the current cost of operations. It's never been below 100% in the last 10 years. So if you look at the performance of what the township board is doing when they spend, if you look at what happens when you hire too many chiefs and you get rid of the Indians, the worker bees, the cost of government, and then you have to supplement that with contractual, grass cutting, snow removal, it doesn't make sense. But somebody, on township board, take some time and look at that data. There's some good data. It tells you that your debt's growing. It tells you where we were at 10 years ago when they paid in like $300,000 on an average for OPEB, and now we're paying like $180,000. And if you look at what goes in and what comes out, and you look at the statistics back there, the performance is extremely poor. It's going in the wrong direction. We're not shedding a lot of debt. We're not paying down what we used to. And we're spending more money on the growth in government, and we're giving the residents less service. Doesn't make sense. But have Plant Moran put on an audit that looks good because it's campaign time. very deceiving for the residents. Thank you.
Further comments from the public?
Hi, Gordon, 50393 Bauer. First and foremost, I want to welcome the new part-time firefighters to the fire department. Hopefully they have a good career here in their duties and do their jobs well. And hopefully they can, hopefully we can see them be expanded to full-time in the not-too-distant future. With that being said, knowing that next week is the election, and knowing that we had 5 candidates in the room tonight, and knowing that everything is very contentious, and seeing how everything has come about, I do want to take this time to note that I had sought to try and prevent a lot of this action from happening. Last year, I had applied for the supervisor position as just an interim. I had no intentions of ever running in this election. I just wanted to serve out the time frame of the 16 months and do things differently than most people in politics have ever done. Those things being, I would have invited discourse all the time because I'm not afraid of a debate in any subject on any matter. I always find that to be very rewarding and intellectually stimulating. Aside from that, I was actually going to voluntarily take a pay cut. And furthermore, the one thing I wanted to solidify was that if I was not going to run in such an election, whoever had won the primary, both candidates I would have met with weekly to ensure proper transition to government, because I believe that is the standing of a caretaker government, to establish yourself as doing the civic duty and then performing it to the end. But that did not happen, and as time moves on, that's all right. But I strive to do that in order to give the township a nice, fresh start, because I knew that a lot of these things would happen now. I have been gifted with foresight, and I know that it is just disastrous what we continuously deal with. We are dealing with a contentious election right now in the primary season, which will then turn over into the general in 3 months. Furthermore, this will then exacerbate into 2 years from now when the entire board is up for election. What do you think is going to happen? We saw things that happened in 2020. Do you really think that things are going to get better by that point in time? The exacerbation that occurs not only from this election within the state government, but you're also going to see a massive exacerbation with the presidential election and the further Senate election that will occur on that, as well as state representative that you're seeing already play out in the primary process that's going on right now. You do not understand that everything is interconnected, and therefore it all relates to each other. Local, state, federal, county, everything. Do you not think that all this plays off each other? The partisan politics, the ego-driven attacks, the situations within personal presentations, everything is interconnected. And that 2024 comes around, it's going to be another contentious, disastrous election. Except this time, it's going to be for 7 positions instead of 1. Do any of you up there actually think about that? Do any of you in the audience actually think that? Does anybody who ever watches these things think that through? Or are you only thinking about next week? Are you not thinking about 2 years from now? Because I'm actually thinking about 2028 time frame. You can foresee everything if you actually look and connect the dots. But oftentimes people never do. They just simply look at what's only in front of them. A lot of times they don't even do that. If you truly wish to be a good leader, you have to first accept whether or not you are part of the problem. If you wish to be a good candidate, you have to ask yourselves whether or not you are worthy of the position or if this is only for your ego. The confidence of the public trust is built within our governing system. And every time I come here, I feel as though, despite being the youngest person in the room, I am the most adult out of every one of you. And I know for certain that last year, I was denied a seat at a table I long since outgrown. If you truly are worthy of your positions, or if you are truly worthy of being a candidate for said position, it's time to be an adult. It's time to lead by example. It's time to put down your egos and act for posterity's sake. We are not entering in good times. They are troubled times ahead. And they will create good people, but it will be hard times. And we cannot afford, let me reiterate that, afford people only seeking out things for themselves. Thank you.
Further comments from the public? Bring it back up to the board, Trustee Anderson.
Again, congratulations to our 5 new firefighters, Connor Brzezinski, Sean Healy, Payton Nagle, Nicholas Prantera, and Robert Randall. Finally, next Tuesday, August 2nd, 2022 is primary election day. Your vote for supervisor may decide who controls both the future fiscal and spatial well-being of our township and how it will impact you for years to come. Study the candidates, vote wisely. Thank you.
Trustee Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I'll just touch on a few things real quick. I'd like to try to answer any questions that were posed from the podium. The comments regarding, and I think just fundamentally we see it differently as it relates to the Second Amendment, the return of the rifles in conjunction with the purchase of new rifles does not put rifles on the street. Like I take issue with the, there wasn't a, it wasn't like the used book sale that the library has. The weapons are purchased. These are weapons that are constitutionally afforded to individuals of this country. They have a protocol and a procedure that involves the sale and distribution by federal firearms license holders, and the assertion that they are just sort of, you know, the Director Bassett didn't have a garage sale and invite people in, and then they went on the street. And so I know your position on guns, and I respect that is different than mine. But likening every violent act perpetrated by a criminal to the weapon and then asserting that the officers of the honor guard have stake, it just got down a rabbit hole there that I just don't agree with. The rifles are not on the street. Those are assets that the township residents and taxpayers paid for. So just destroying them, you know, and losing the revenue associated with them would be financially irresponsible, in my opinion. So they were part of the purchase of the new weaponry that the public safety director felt, and he made a presentation to the board as to how that was consistent with the evil and dangers in the world and potentially what his officers face. And I supported that, and I continue to support that. Again, the disagreement on the Second Amendment is just, I think, where we divide. The other comment that was made, Mr. Kadich, with regard to the concerns about PFAS, and I sent out an email to a small group. The Facebook post that you referenced, I did see it. It did not contain any zip codes, obviously, of Chesterfield. They were neighboring communities. But the questions about PFAS sources is valid, and just the other comment that you made about your comment being removed, that is a individually created Facebook page that wasn't part of any township government. So the individuals and the moderators of those pages deal with their content based on the page rules. Nobody here even had access to remove your comment, as far as I know. The zip codes that were created and the original, that was a repost from the Great Lakes PFAS Action Network. And anybody who was part of that group, I think Mr. LaFata, I believe I sent it to you, Mr. Kadich. There was an individual in the township, Adam Vershak, who was very interested. I sent that to him as well. And recently I received a request back from the Toxics Campaign Director at the Ecology Center in Ann Arbor, which is a division of the Great Lakes PFAS Action Network. And I'm talking with her about a grant opportunity. It's a small grant that would, somewhere in the neighborhood of $5,000 to $10,000 is available, and I'm asking for some of those funds, even though we're not a 5013. With the help of the Ecology Center, we could use those funds to promote community education and engagement, bring in some panel speakers. We could have a broader scale communication about the issues, so having a professionally managed Facebook page or any other social media, engaging with decision makers and things from either the base or the county is something that our group could do. And then also the ability to conduct independent testing of water sources, laboratory testing supplies is part of the grant. And also the key is legal and technical analysis. As you recall, the initial meeting with the Ecology Center folks in the Great Lakes PFAS Action Network had to do with a legal challenge to the Department of Defense at the Wordsmith base in Oscoda. Those reports were not readily made available to the public until legal action was filed, and this organization is positioned to help us and anybody who wants to be part of this group. So if you're interested, I'd be happy to send you some details. There are some meetings upcoming, and the grant deadline is actually this Friday. So I have taken some time off work and will actually spend an afternoon making sure our grant is in and prepared, because I'd like to see more than we've received so far regarding PFAS. So if you're interested in that, I'd be happy to share that. You know, any input from any resident is welcome. The agenda item that we had a lot of conversation about, specifically the rezoning and the MX2 in particular. The question that was initially posed by Trustee Anderson regarding the $13 million bond for infrastructure improvements on the north end. It becomes a very, very difficult thing, and it kind of piggybacks into some of the things that Mr. Warden talked about in terms of divisiveness on the board. My biggest problem when I start looking at agenda items like that, and I start to, in my mind, process why people voted the way that they did. When Trustee Anderson talked about developers receiving shovel-ready projects when other developers in other parts of the township, that was the cost of doing business. So if you want to build a development in a particular area that doesn't have infrastructure, your costs, like we saw, say, at Story Point, they had over $500,000 of additional infrastructure because their water and sewer needs weren't readily available when they constructed it. So the cost of doing business there was to do the upgrades in order to put the project in. That's traditionally how it's always gone. We didn't really hear about this sort of field of dreams concept until the last supervisor came in, and building things on the if you build it, they will come is a tremendous upfront cost to the existing system payers. And that's the problem that I have. Some would argue that it's not consistent with a true visionary if you don't provide, that you will never have the ability to attract. And so there's debate on that. But what I get into the trouble with is I see developers who are very friendly with politicians, and they are enhanced by the infrastructure that goes in at the expense of taxpayers, and that's where I get into the most trouble, because I start, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to make assertions that people are voting a certain way, you know, but it does create problems for the more observant members of the public who come in and go, wait, who gets that deal? Who gets $1 million worth of infrastructure put in before I even arrive and make myself known. I just don't like that. I don't like, and so when we had the discussion tonight and the question was asked, you know, will these new developers pay? And there was an emphatic, yes, they will. It's not true. There's no way they can pay. There's no way they can pay for the cost. You're making a secondary argument which says over the long run they will pay for the, but that's not that wasn't the question that was asked. Who's paying for it when the shovels go in the ground, when the heavy equipment lands and they start digging? Who's paying for that? You are. The existing rate payer, and the enterprise fund will pay those expenses. That is a fact. Secondary to that is over the course of decades, the users will of course then pay for, but that wasn't the question as I understood Trustee Anderson asking. So the vote on the rezoning had nothing to do with the bond. That had already been approved, and I was outspoken then. I'll continue to be, but I thought that the master plan work that was done was good work, and I like the concept of what 26 Mile Road will look like when we get to that point. So that was the reason for the yes vote. I do apologize, Ms. Mattson. I just realized as I was looking for some additional support here from a few emails that I had from residents that you emailed me this afternoon and I didn't see it and didn't include your library request in my board report. So I missed that, and I'm sorry. I normally check that before board meetings and try to share whatever library issues we have. If I could just do it real quickly now, the Chesterfield Library Board of Trustees has approved a library millage ballot proposal to the electors, which will be at the November 8th, 2022 election. The ballot proposal will request 1 mill for 15 years for the construction and operation of the new public library. Facts about the ballot proposal may be found at the library's website, which is chelibrary.org, chelibrary.org. I apologize for not including that in the board reports. Lastly, Mr. Supervisor, I just wanted to revisit I guess a not so pleasant topic, which I'm happy to report has had pretty good results, and that was the ugly debate that we had over several meetings regarding the shopping cart ordinance. So I kind of keep an eye on that, and it looks like the carts are down. I don't know. I can't imagine we're billing the stores for this. I'm assuming we're just picking them up and taking them back. However it's working out, it seems to be working out from a blight standpoint. But during the course of those discussions, there were some heated exchanges. One in particular involved this idea of a potentially racially divisive outcome. I had a very unfortunate, ugly exchange with a particular resident who, during the course of the deliberations, was in the audience yelling things at me, and I responded by using some inflammatory language. In fact, I said that I felt the screams of racist were race baiting. And what's happened since that is nothing short of just really an attempt to sort of cancel me. I have a number of organizations that I work with which have a very large African American participation rate. And I was out at a Juneteenth event, and the group that I was supporting that night had some really difficult letters sent to their membership, including their officers. And I actually received a call from a lady by the name of Janice Mathis. Ms. Mathis is in Atlanta, Georgia. She is the national chairperson and president of the National Council of Negro Women. She wanted to talk to me about this exchange and my use of race baiting and race hustling, which I felt at the time was appropriately describing what I was dealing with. It was inflammatory in the sense that it hurt a lot of people who heard that out of context when they only hear that this trustee is referring to somebody and their behavior as race baiting, there's not a lot of opportunity for me to explain myself. My words have to just, I can't deny that I said them. And that was wrong. I made a terrible mistake in the use of that words because, for many reasons, but principally among them, it allowed an opportunity to paint me as somehow a racist guy, and that's couldn't be further from the truth. So in talking with Ms. Mathis, I assured her that I owed her an apology for that language, and the use of that language did not help to create an environment that I know our residents really want, which is a non-divided community where race really isn't important, that what's important is what you give back to the community. So, Ms. Mathis, I heard your concerns loud and clear. I have tremendous respect for the organization that she presides over on a national level, as I do many other of my friends who work in various African-American organizations. So, Ms. Mathis, I'm sorry, and I hope this closes the chapter on that particular issue. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Oh, and one last thing, are you making any kind of proposals to extend the election cycle? Because I could see that it was quite fun tonight. Oh, I take it we are not.
To start with, congratulations to the 5 firefighters. Good luck, stay safe. Firefighting is definitely a career that can be life-ending, just like law enforcement. It's got its things. So I wish you the best of luck and stay safe. The comments from several people in the audience, very interesting. Mr. Speaker, I disagree with what you say, your tone of voice, how you address people, but that's who you are. You run your campaign the way you do. But I was asked a question recently in the last week by 2 people in the city of Sterling Heights who are elected officials, and the question directed at me, and they all know who I am since I work there, and I'm on the board out here, and they says, is John Speaker running for a position out there? And I said, yes. And all their reply was, again? You should know what that means. I don't.
Trustee Vosberg.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Tonight I have 6 things I want to address. I'm usually quite brief. In fact, I told my grandson I should be back at the house. They're spending time with us, but I think it might be a little bit later than I thought it would be. First of all, I want to welcome the new firefighters. I too admire the things that they do and how they protect us in our community. I appreciate it. And part of the first thing that I'm mentioning, talking about the new firefighters, and also to Mitch O'Connor, while he's not a new employee, he has a new position, and I wish him well. Second thing is a carpetbagger. That comment was used earlier. I looked it up. It says a political candidate who seeks election in an area where they have no local connections. I think the person that he was referring to, Brad Kersten, who has over 30 years of service to this township. So I believe he's quite familiar with it. In contrast to the speaker who bought a house here in May 24 of 2019 and filed to run for a Chesterfield Township office on April 17 of 2020. Didn't even live here a year. Next is, I heard somebody say that we are providing less service to our community. That's just ludicrous. We have made many moves to provide better and improved service, and also more services across the broad spectrum of services here. The fourth thing I want to say is, just because you don't know about or haven't heard about how things are happening or decisions are being made doesn't mean that decisions aren't being made, and it doesn't mean that our employees don't know how to make those decisions. I heard there were mentioning about PFAS in an organization. That is not in the name of the township. Those are private individuals or other corporations, which is fine. I think it's good to be concerned about the PFAS, but it's not being done in the name of the township. The last thing I want to mention is how about sewer assessment. We bought our house in 1975. It wasn't hooked up, it's right here on Sugar Bush Road in Chesterfield Township. It was not hooked up to the sewer. Sewer didn't even come down Sugar Bush Road. After a few years when we lived here, the sewer came down Sugar Bush Road. We were one of the first people to tap in because our septic system wasn't in the best of shape. We had to pay for an assessment based on the number of feet on our front yard. It was 105 feet. I remember that, and that's how I know how wide our yard is, 105 feet. And we had to pay that portion, that percentage portion of that total sewer coming down Sugar Bush. We had to pay that portion of it, in addition to the sewer tap that we had to pay for, and in addition to running the service from the road to our house. That's how those costs get shared among the people who receive the services. Perhaps the township bonded. I don't know how they funded it then, if they bonded it. But that money got paid back for all that work to bring the sewer down Sugar Bush. Thank you.
Treasurer Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I'd also like to congratulate the new part-time firefighters. Thank you for committing to Chesterfield Township. I remember when we were voting on the master plan here recently, and I do remember something that really stood out to me. I didn't really understand what these new mixed-use places were, and Jonathan Palin had spoken about it and explained it really well in the original master plan vote. Thought it was interesting. Also took some drives around the areas such as in Shelby. And what really stuck out to me then on that particular night when we did that vote was Trustee Joseph, and our children grew up together and went to school together, so he had referred to, he has a daughter the same age as mine, and he had said that he had talked about this and how it would provide a space for housing, if you remember that, Trustee Joseph, for that age group that our kids are. And I also find it interesting that during that time of developing the master plan, I'm certain that the Planning Commission had talked about water and sewer infrastructure out at the 26-mile area. So this was something that was talked about when I first started, and I'm sure it was in discussions when there was a former treasurer and the former supervisor, and there were other people on the Planning Commission, and during Trustee Joseph's service on that commission as well. So I believe that this has been in conversation for a long time. Obviously, it is political season. There were many, many disturbing accusations from political candidates tonight. Many of them are misleading, and this is, as I've said earlier in this campaign, stay true to who you are. Flipping parties, as one candidate has done, running for office 6 times. It's anything. It seems to be there's an attitude of anything to get a job. And I know that one particular candidate is looking for a job. And I believe this, even willing to spoil ballots and misleading people on how to vote is very sad, very sad. Anything to get yourself elected. And this is not how you lead a township. You lead a township through the hard decisions, through having to get beat up. It's a thankless job. You go from, Supervisor Kersten has gone from being probably one of the most admired and respected to having to come in here every 2 weeks and have 5 or 6 people who are passing notes and calling each other and working together to degrade employees, to spread misinformation, to just to say everything, looking for problems, just out. And I make notes at every board meeting of all of the things that you guys bring up, the same group brings up. And you guys are working together, and you're working together to hurt this community, the community that you say that you love. The reputation that we have because of the people that come up here and just degrade and degrade and degrade, it's very negative, and it's very sad, and it's very disturbing, and it's quite irresponsible in my opinion. And with that, I'll say goodnight.
Clerk Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. As it's been mentioned, polls will be open next Tuesday, August 2nd, from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. All absentee ballots must be received by the clerk's office by 8 p.m. if you are voting by absentee ballot. If you have any question about where to vote, how you can participate in this election, or the proper way to do so, you can contact the clerk's office, but you can also go to the website, go to the elections page, and we will have all of the precinct map is there, all the voting locations, and all of the instructions for participating in this upcoming primary election. Please remember, do not allow anyone to be in possession of your absentee ballot if it is unsealed, and do not allow anyone other than your immediate family member, yourself, or an immediate household member to return that absentee ballot to our office. Also, please keep in mind that this is a primary election, which means you can only select candidates from either the Republican or the Democratic columns. You cannot choose candidates from both. If you do, you will spoil your ballot and your vote will not count. Also, if you have made selections on an absentee ballot that has already been received by our office and you would like to make a change to that, you may come into our office, and by written request, you may spoil that ballot and be issued a new ballot. If you have an absentee ballot in your possession and you would rather vote at the polls, you must bring that ballot with you to the polls at your precinct location on Election Day, surrender that ballot, and you will be issued a regular ballot. In addition to that, this recent Monday, I was invited to speak at the Brown Elite Youth Elevation Foundation to young people between the ages of 7 and 17 years of age. And it was interesting because I was asked to come and speak about what a clerk does, what we do as elected officials, what that means, how you do that, and basically mentor and inspire these young folks who are quite a bit different than us. They are mostly from urban centers, underprivileged areas, and they are looking for inspiration and leadership and how to proceed with achieving their dreams and goals. It was a great privilege for me to be invited to that group. I would encourage you to visit their website at brownelite.org. They are a tremendous organization doing all of the right things to help our youth, and we can only hope to support these types of foundations as they go about their work. And it ties in a lot with what was things that we hear and see around election time. You know, I spoke to them about, obviously, chasing their dreams. I talked to them about how you achieve those, how we in leadership are effective leaders, and how they can be meaningful and effective, positive leaders moving forward. And I said one of the most important things as a leader is that you need to have a positive attitude. Effective, meaningful leaders will have positive attitudes. We lift others up. We don't tear others down. We have respectful discourse with each other. Doesn't mean we agree all the time, but when we do it respectfully. When we disagree, I think sometimes we forget those things as we are in the course of doing our jobs as elected leaders, and it can become difficult and sometimes almost impossible for some people to separate a campaign from a governing function. So I explained that to them, and it was a tremendous opportunity for both myself. I learned as much from them as I hope they learned from me, and I encourage other members of this board I know have done that in the past and provided mentorship to our young people. And it was just a tremendous privilege for me and an honor, and I would be happy to go back there anytime. I encourage others to do so as well. I don't normally use this position to make political statements. I think that's improper. But I will say this, I'm going to break protocol for the last 10 years I've been here. Bradley Kersten's your best choice for supervisor, and I would want him more than anyone to work next to me side by side, because I just don't trust that anyone else who is an option would work as effectively. In fact, several of them have said, I don't want to work with you. I wouldn't work with you. I have no interest in talking to you. How are we possibly going to effectively govern that way? Supervisor Kersten has been nothing but respectful. He's been nothing but willing to learn, and he has been completely supportive in working cooperatively with both myself and Treasurer Elliott on a daily basis. He's an enormously effective, and we are very, very fortunate to have him as our leader. I hope to see that in the next 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Clerk Berry. And thank you, trustees, for your supportive comments and kind comments tonight. I truly appreciate it. As you all know, yes, I am an appointed position. There's no denying it. That was obvious. That was transparent and done by this entire board with the support of the entire board a little over a year ago. So again, I thank you. It's been a learning experience. It's been a great experience, and there's nothing better than to sit in this position and enjoy it day to day. But we should be embarrassed. Again, I said this in a past meeting. What Mitch O'Connor had to go through tonight and endure is embarrassing. And it's because of a few select individuals in the public that fuel discourse and fuel embarrassment. The public here should be embarrassed by what you say at the podium. I'll own every single word I say. When we have an individual that comes for employment here in the township has the highest degree and education that we've ever had in that role, and we embarrass him. He has a standard contract that's formatted from every other public safety, any other contract employee in here. It's been mirrored across the board, same as mine when I was public safety director. Transparency, you should know, you were here, you were voted, you were elected here, and then you lost. And then you come and bring all of this garbage to the board meeting at every meeting, acting as though you're the expert. I don't walk around here and buy donuts and bagels for people. I don't have a cooking iron outside my office and make flapjacks for them. This is a place of employment. This is where you work. The residents pay their taxes for our employees to work, and that's what is demanded of them from me. Mitch, I apologize. I'm sorry you left tonight, but I apologize to you for putting you through this and having to experience this. Just some quick comments on the 26-mile road. I didn't think it was coming up tonight, so master plan is the master plan. It was developed when I took office. Developers who called me and said, hey, you have this master plan, we own property, what do we do, how do we get it? And I reached out to every single one of you when I first took office and said, developers are here, they want to know what to do. How do we address this? They want water and sewer. Oh, and by the way, somebody approved an Ascension Hospital on 26-mile road with no sewer. They're going to put an on-site sewer plant, and other developers along the line said, yeah, we'll do the same thing. Here we are talking about PFAS, but we're not worried about the water that's discharged from an on-site development into a county drain and a county ditch. That's where my request is rooted in. It's not rooted in developers or development. It's what's best for the township. I don't want sewer being discharged into a county drain down county line to the Lake St. Clair, where we have other worries with. Again, the disinformation and the lies and the intentional misleading of the residents, it's got to stop. It's got to stop from you. You point the fingers at the elected officials, but it's you. It's you who come to the podium and just espouse nastiness. I am running to retain this seat and let the residents of Chesterfield Township decide. Well, that being said, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Support. Supported by Trustee Demink. All's in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Meeting's adjourned.
I got 9:18.